Welcome to the ACC Panic Room alongside Lauren Brownlow. I'm Joe Ovies. When's the Big Four final between NC State and Carolina today? I haven't gotten a time.
I mean, it's probably coming up, the actual game, isn't it? Like,
it's actually on the 21st. Yeah, they play on the 21st.
Okay, so not super soon, but soon enough. No. This month, I figured. Yeah.
No, I wanted to play at Reynolds. As some people joked yesterday, let's go to Dorton. Why not? Open up the windows. It's like spring outside. You might as well play a basketball game. Although the court might get a little moist at this time of the year. All right, let's start with the big surprise of this Big Four doubleheader that we had last night. Which Luke DeCock and I of the News and Observer were discussing what has been a somewhat boring ACC, not so exciting ACC season, one that was setting up for kind of a paltry list of NCAA tournament teams. We were gifted some surprises last night, and the biggest one being NC State's win over Duke. I know State fans are surprised. And I feel like last night was more about, and this is a controversial thing to say, and I'm not trying to hot take it up, but I think last night was more of an eye-opener for how Duke responded to NC State big boying them more than NC State at this point.
Yeah, I can see, because the thing about it is, and I even had like State fans telling me this, which I get it, like they've beaten Duke plenty of times at home.
Yeah.
Weirdly, far more than UNC.
I think it's five of the last 7 at PNC Arena has been NC State.
And they've done it on years where they haven't even made the tournament, and Duke's like won it all or gone to the top. Doesn't matter. Does not matter.
Was that 2015 where they smoked them? I think that was the butt slap game. Yeah, the butt slap game was Mark Godfrey slapping Coach K's rear end, and he slapped him into the NCAA tournament final.
That's the second funniest game in recent series history. As we all know, the funniest, and I know it doesn't count, but I was there and I saw it, so I don't care, is the one at Cameron when that state team. And again, that just kind of shows like there are just some teams that no matter what in the ACC, they just kind of seem to have your number. Like it's a good, I don't know, for whatever reason, like it doesn't necessarily mean anything long-term. And that's what a lot of State fans were saying, like cool that they did it, fun, whatever, but like it's happened before and ended in, they weren't able to build on it, right?
Yeah.
And so I get it. Like, I get why State fans would look at that and say, okay, cool, but, like, I still need more. I understand. But you've also got DJ Burns. Like, come on. If that's not enough to get you to PNC, like, thankfully the crowd filled out, but I was disappointed initially. Like, I'm like, I've never seen a State crowd like that for a Duke or Carolina game, ever.
We could talk about the crowd a little bit later because I do think it filled out some, but I have thoughts on that we can save for later in the conversation. I'm glad you brought up DJ Burns because it's easy to look at Terquavion Smith and Jarkel Joyner and see how they filled it up and go, well, there you go. You know, Gilio joke about all the list of the hero of the day for NC State players in these Duke games, right? Like the first one that comes to mind for me, 1998 and CeCe Harrison, right? We've seen the Al Freeman game. We saw the Dennis Smith game, as you mentioned. So seeing those two guys fill it up the way that they did, and I thought did a good job because you know how State fans can get, and some State fans interacted with you and me about this last night about what is a safe lead because you talk about weird things. Let's not forget that 20-some-odd point lead that was blown at Cameron Indoor Stadium.
Right,
okay?
And so that's why I knew they were especially gun-shy. Like, State fans are going to be gun-shy with the lead anyway, but, like, especially against Duke, understood. I get it.
Yes. So I understand the mentality. So credit to Joyner and for Terquavion Smith to hit big shots.
Yes.
Like was trying to chip away there, and then Terquavion went on his own, 8-0 run at that point. But that game was sloppy early. And Kevin Keats talked about this after the game, where that he gets worried about the squad, even pre-squad, when they don't score, they can kind of get, tense. They clam up a little bit.
Yeah.
And when it was ugly early, in the first 3 minutes of that game, who was the one that got things going? DJ Burns. DJ Burns was the one. He had a little 6-0 run there on his own, and it's like it's deceptive. You see DJ Burns on the court, and you're thinking, who is this guy? Dude's got moves, okay? He's got moves. There was one surge late in the game in the second half that had everybody chanting his name. We had like a step-back floater.
Yes, it was beautiful.
It was like, what is happening right now? And people lost their minds.
it's just like, for me, I mean, I have been better lately at finding joy in some small things. You know, you kind of have to when you're stuck at home on COVID for a lot of, a lot of the time.
Right.
And DJ Burns is one of those things for me. His joy playing basketball is contagious. And I just would encourage State fans, like, I get it. Maybe you didn't want to invest. Like, maybe you don't want to be hurt again. But just go to the games and just let DJ Burns' joy fill you up. Like, that's all I'm saying.
It's great.
And every time he touched the ball, like, everybody got excited. Whenever he made a shot, everybody's like, it was the loudest cheer I'd heard all night. And that helped too, I think, because like it got the crowd like way more into it as it's filling out. Like, it was just magic. Anytime he got called for a foul, that was the loudest boo I heard. Like, I tweeted this and I mean it. I'm glad that the State fans that were there, and hopefully more State fans keep showing up for him, just for him. Just do it for DJ. I'm just saying, let him fill you with joy, because like they loved him the way he deserves.
So I'm not going to your point as to where we got with the start of this conversation, I'm not going to try to extrapolate any meaning out of another State surprise win, quote unquote surprise win,
right,
over Duke, because NC State fans know this. You and I know this.
They
can turn around
evidence.
And lay an egg.
I understand.
But here's the thing that I sometimes I have to practice what I preach when it comes to certain things when we talk about ACC basketball, not get too wrapped up in what we see in November and December, and even in certain early parts of January, especially as these teams become more and more cobbled together pieces that won't really find themselves until later on in the year, right? But you look at NC State's losses. You know what the combined record is of their conference losses?
Yeah, it's good.
It's 11-1.
Yeah.
You look at the top of the ACC standings right now, you'd be confused to think that, is this an ideal football top 5 at this point in time? You know, Clemson's at the top, Pitt's at the top, Miami. What is happening right now? Right?
Basketball, a hot start in ACC play.
I know.
What could go wrong?
I know. We've seen this movie before. I totally understand where you're coming from on that one. But the point is, there's some context to where NC State's record is right now. That is not to say that you don't want that first Pitt game back. That's not to say that you didn't have Miami on the ropes.
Those are good teams, though. Like, those are 3 of the better teams in the league right now. And I think right now we see teams like Duke and North Carolina, to a degree, like still kind of struggling to find where they are going to fit in this year's ACC. I don't know that we have any idea for sure yet.
Same thing goes with Duke. To transition the conversation over to Duke, again, my surprise isn't that Duke lost. That was unfolding, and it was almost getting embarrassing for the Blue Devils. I thought to myself, DeGilio was up in the press box with me, and it was like we were all having this conversation about, well, we know how Coach K would handle this, right? Like, we know what Coach K would say after the game. We know there'd be some speculation of, oh, man, they're practicing tonight, or Coach K is going to have all of their equipment in a bag on the floor and not letting you in the locker room, things that have actually happened in the past. We don't know how Jon Scheyer is going to handle this. We don't know how Jon Scheyer is going to process through what has been a very weird, incomplete season for the Blue Devils, where I know what their one identity is. They're theoretically a good defensive team. They're a big team, good defensively, but none of that was on display last night. And the bigger issue for them is it's as Gilio likes to say, as he's sitting across from here in the cubicle, who's the bus driver? Who's the bus driver for Duke? They don't have one right now, and that's a problem. Not to say they can't develop that, because it is only January 5th, but right now that's a huge problem for the Blue Devils. I don't know what they are.
I think I would have thought maybe it would have been Jeremy Roach, and I think that surprised me a bit that it hasn't.
Surprised he didn't get benched last night.
I know, and the thing is too, like I saw Duke people tweeting this as well that were at the game, like that, there's no one stepping up in those huddles either as a player, and you would think of anybody, it would be Jeremy. And the other thing too is, like, as we know, like, Shirer's not K. He's just not. And I don't mean that as like a pejorative. I just mean they're completely different in terms of their styles, their sideline personalities, all of that stuff. And so, like, to think that he's going to, like, have them practicing or whatever, like, take their gear away, that doesn't strike me as, like, Shire style. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Like, maybe he takes that from K and he's like, I'm going to do it. I just don't necessarily think that's his style. And I don't know and by the way, Kay did this sometimes too. Like when some of his teams were going through a rough patch, he would go through a phase with them where he wanted to like love on them a little bit and be like, listen, like I'm here for you. Like we're going to get through this. Like we'll figure it out. I still believe in you. And I think watching them run offense, I don't even know if I should put it that way. Cause it was like, what was it? It was just like a bunch of like, let's pass it around until we can maybe try to attack the paint at the end of a shot clock and do something wild. I mean, it was just the offense was incoherent to me. I didn't understand what they were trying to do. And I think that's the concern for me. Like we know they can defend and we know they can create off of turnovers and everything like that. But human nature, right, just kind of means that your intensity is going to drop some when you're not when you go that long without making a shot. Like at a certain point, you have to think maybe you aren't going to make another one.
Yeah, but the thing to keep in mind, and it was good to catch up with Wes Durham of the ACC Network after the game. It was funny. He was like, "I'm not saying it's Carolina like last year, but let's not forget that Carolina got run out of Wake Forest, and
for sure,
and we're all sitting here going like
places
with plenty of gyms, and they'll go on to win. Now again." See, if you want to keep it, if you don't even want to talk about other examples within the ACC, you can just keep it to the beginning of this conversation, and that we've seen good Duke teams get run out of out of PNC Arena and have really good seasons.
Maybe not quite like that.
No, that's like, last night was different. Last night was a little bit way different. All right, to Carolina. You talked about defense. It's the one thing that I've been. It's funny. We talked about this on the show yesterday. Talking about Carolina is really simple. It's like,
really
are your key guys doing what they should be doing? Well, then chances are Carolina's going to win. So what I liked about last night, though, in their win against Wake Forest was twofold. They were able to overcome Caleb Love's inefficient play, if we will. And the
on
one
both
thing,
ends of the court, by the way.
Yes, and the one thing that I've been pushing, at least as I watch them, it's like, guys, come on, it's defense. They're like a middling defensive team. They have spurts of decent defense. The difference last night, late in the game, was they started getting into transition. How are those easy transition baskets coming together? The turnovers.
And Wake's, I was surprised early on that they weren't forcing more of those because Wake is kind of a turnover-y team by nature. They like to play up tempo. That's kind of their style. And so I was like, Wake could have had that many turnovers by accident early on, just not even. And at one point, Wake had more steals than Carolina had assists, and I'm like, that's not great.
That's not good.
But they started, and I think in the past, I've chalked some of that defensive up and down play because you even saw it when they turned things around last year in March and February or whatever. Is they have such a thin rotation that sometimes they got to save those spurts for when they really might need them, but they used some of that depth last night.
That's where Trimble comes in. Trimble had really good minutes last night.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, Trimble, McCoy had some key minutes. And then, Leaky Black stepped up as an alternative scorer, as an alternative scoring option. Without him, maybe they are run out of the gym early, without the way he played in the first half. So, yeah, it's complicated with them. You look at, some of the numbers they were allowing early and you're like, it's not great, y'all. But then they managed to, like you said, find a little. It's weird. Their spurts aren't offensive usually because that part has been better this year. I feel and more consistent than it was last year, which is part of why they would get run out of gyms because they were bad on both ends of the court in some of those games. But now they're scoring usually. They don't always run offense the right way. It's sometimes mess, but they're usually scoring. Now the problem is the defense is just kind of up and down. And, if you get into a place in a game where you're going back and forth with somebody and the pressure's on you to keep scoring, I don't necessarily know, Carolina can do it, but is everybody playing at a high enough level right now, like last year, to where you assume they'll outscore somebody? Not really.
I think they're getting there. I think the other positives for, this team kind of understanding what the expectations are and doing it on a consistent basis has truly come through with RJ Davis.
Yes.
Armando is going to be Armando. I don't think there's any, you're getting a healthy Armando Bacot. You know what you're getting straight up. Right. And Caleb Love is the roller coaster, as we've discussed so many times going back to last year. To me, the steadying force consistently has been RJ Davis. When RJ locks in, he has, again, it could be, we always talk about leadership, right? We were talking about Duke earlier. Sometimes the steadying force might not be something that happens in a huddle. It's how you're playing. And that, to me, has been R.J. Davis in their biggest moment so far this year, the steadying force. And, again, consistency of doing that has been elusive for the Tar Heels. But this is yet another building block.
But remember what
a step back against Pitt. This is a step forward.
Remember what their record used to be in games where Caleb Love played poorly. Like, they've been able to overcome that far more this year than they had in the past, like his first 2 years. So that's a good sign for them as well. And RJ's been consistent, and that's also a good thing. But, let's be real. Last year, Brady Manek got hot, and what that meant is you couldn't double team Armando Bacot as often down low because there were shooting threats all over the floor if he passed back out. And now I think people are kind of still daring their outside shooters to beat them at this point. And they still need to make sure that they stay focused on getting the ball inside to him. It feels like sometimes they'll go through long stretches where his only touches are on offensive rebounds, and they've got to make sure they keep getting him the ball.
All right, let's go back to the crowd at PNC Arena before we get out of here. Look, this is a layered conversation about.
But I hate crowd hot takes. This is not me trying to do that.
This is me.
I was genuinely surprised.
Yes, this is me trying to have a non-hot take, honest conversation about where we are in sports attendance. Okay, sports attendance in general is down, straight up, for a variety of reasons. The biggest culprit is that the technology is too good now. And it's not compelling enough to leave your house. I've seen this conversation with the Carolina Hurricanes coming up, the outdoor game, right? If you want to watch the game, like actually watch the game, stay home.
Yeah.
But if you want to experience the game, well, then you go and you deal with the bad sight lines and the expensive stuff and everything else, right? So you're going for the experience. The problem is that the experiences on a Wednesday night in January at 9:00, do I go through all that and sit in traffic and everything else? I'm talking about the Carolina game, which also had a crowd for a
Niner.
For a Niner, right? And that's the thing. It's like 9:00 is too late on a weeknight because it's a school night. Got to go to work, blah, blah, blah.
7 o'clock, you got to deal with all the traffic of getting there.
Right. Yeah. So it's
8 o'clock's really the sweet spot, if we're being honest.
But TV dictates, and that's why you got to have two.
ACC
it's a
double
header.
I appreciate that, ACC Network.
I get that. So there's a larger conversation about, in general, people are not as compelled to go to sporting events as they once were.
Sure.
And TV technology is a direct result of that. Okay.
Yes.
Now we get into the apathy portion of the conversation.
Yeah, that's
okay.
Yeah, it has to follow.
And I was actually shout out to Corey Smith because I talked to him for a little bit because he, poor Corey's dealing with state fans on Pack Pride that are like, the crowd was good, And I told Corey what I'm going to say here. I said, I find it strange that people questions are wrong. I'm not trying to be gatekeepy here.
No, you know what happens with crowd takes.
With crowd takes, my point last night was, even in the leanest of NC State years, and there's been plenty of them.
They've always showed up for that.
They always show up for the Duke game.
And
They always show up for the Carolina game. And depending on the day, depending on when it happens, they'll show up for the Wake Forest game. Okay? There's a little like old timer type thing that shows up for that. But specifically Duke and Carolina, regardless of the year, people are going to show up. So last night was, and people want to bring up students, y'all. I have been to plenty of games in these windows where the student seats end up being taken over by other people, or you have enough people who have come back for the start of school. Like we're talking about NC State. A lot of people just have to drive in from Cary, from Durham. Like it's a local thing, okay? So let's stop it with, the students are out of town. The students are home, all right? I went to NC State. I know the deal. The point is that last night was eye-opening in that there was a lot of blue, and there were a lot of empty seats outside the student section. And while the crowd was, quote-unquote, loud, again, how many times have you been to that building, Brownlow? How many times have I been to that building?
Yeah.
There have been better crowds. There have been insane crowds. And
it's
Corey brought up the Rodney
Purvis
game. Yeah, it's usually filled.
Like, that's the thing. No one, and like, I don't know why people get like this. Like, well, I do, but whatever. No one's saying you're all bad fans.
No.
Like that. I don't know why everyone gets so defensive. It's like, I guess maybe they think because they obsess over like Carolina and Duke's crowd size for football games that it would be hypocritical of them unless they like to have a small crowd. I don't know, but it's like, dude, it happens all the time to everyone for various reasons. Like, it's fine.
And it shows you where things are with the NC State program.
And
people are still going to show up.
Yeah,
people are still going to show up, but it ain't what it used to be.
Fans in my mentions to know that there is an element of them that are just tired of the Keats era. And to me, that's as easy of an explainable factor, plus all the other things we mentioned, as anything else. It's like, okay, I show up and they win. What does that mean? Nothing. Okay, I show up and they lose. Great. I watch them lose another game. Like, what's the point? I get it. And it's fine. Like, I understand why y'all feel that way. The reason I haven't been to a Panthers game in forever, and it's not just, it's not because I'm sick now. It's because, like, I don't, why?
Yeah,
why
what's the
would
point?
I do that?
Well, it even came down to last night. Like, I stuck around to see if there was going to be a crowd rush, right? I mean, there was enough students there. And if you wanted to rush the court, you could have. But what I noticed was, there was like a couple security people holding these guys back, holding the students back. I think the students, as they were holding them back, I think they realized, what's the point? Let's just go home, right? And again, I said the same thing. I've been to enough games at PNC Arena, and I've seen enough court rushes at PNC Arena where I have literal people climbing over me back when the media seat used to be on the floor across from the NC State bench. If you really wanted to rush the court, you would have. Not one single security guy saying, no, guys, you can't go out there. I've literally seen people climb over. On the 10-year anniversary, Brownlow, of Will Privet rolling out to center court. We talked to him yesterday on the show. If there's a want-to factor to rush the court, you will rush the court. So that wasn't really an element yesterday. And I asked Kevin Keats about that. I said, man, are you like surprised that there was no court rush last night? He said he was glad there wasn't a court rush last night, which I thought was interesting because he's like, in a way I kind of agree with him. In a way I kind of agree with him because if your state, we lost Brownlow.
I'm back.
Oh, there you go. If your state, and as we talked about, you've done this a bunch of times, at some point you got to stop rushing the court. It's like, we beat Duke again at home. All right, cool. Moving on.
Yeah. No, and I mean, also, like, I thought part of it was, like, they were up by, like, 30 half the game. Like, it wasn't as if it was close or, like, there was any suspense. Yeah. So it almost felt like it would be, like, embarrassing feeling to, like, it's one thing to beat them by, like, 15. It's another thing to beat them the way they beat them and then be like, yes, we did an upset. It's like, well, it didn't feel like an upset by the end, did it? It really didn't.
All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the ACC Panic Room. We will see you all this weekend.